Going on, guys? Today we are going to be going over my Eldritch Blast action skill build. I set out with the goal of seeing how much damage we could get out of Eldritch Blast and how viable it would be to spam Eldritch Blast in place of our weapons and hopefully one-shot our entire screen of trash mobs. I am happy to report that this is in fact possible, and it is viable to use Eldritch Blast as your main source of mobbing as long as you build it out properly, and then you are able to clear your screen with just a few blasts with essentially zero cooldown or downtime. This build is extremely tanky as well and extremely straightforward to play and visually very satisfying in my opinion. It's a very fun sort of alternative way to play Vex compared to her more gun focused or minion focused builds. So in this video I'll take you through the important things to know about Eldritch Blast and how to scale its damage effectively, as well as the build that we'll be using for it, as well as some alternative options. Now before we get started, I want to make it clear this is not a bossing build. I've spent a lot of time in the last week or so just doing damage testing, learning the ins and outs of scaling Eldritch Blast, and really just no matter what we do, the single target damage just simply isn't there. I mean, you can kill bosses with your Eldritch Blast plus your ordnance plus your weapons. Bosses will never be able to kill you or harm you, but you're not going to be getting that crazy one-shot damage that you see in a lot of builds. So if that's something you're here for, sorry to disappoint you, but that's just not something we can do with Eldritch Blast. That should not be a surprise to anybody. But fortunately, Vex's overall kit is just extremely strong and just so versatile that if we do want to farm some bosses, which unfortunately is most of the endgame content right now, we can just swap a couple items around without having to respec our skills. So obviously I'll touch on that later in the video when we get to the bossing section. So for that reason, I understand if people are hesitant to try out the build, but if you like farming drill sites, for example, like I do, or just roaming the open world, wrapping up side quests and getting collectibles, doing stuff like that, this build's perfect for that. Like I said, a ton of fun. I would highly recommend at least trying it out if you have the items. So I want to start by doing a deep dive into Eldritch Blast, sort of what our options are for augments and capstones and the skill tree, how to actually scale Eldritch Blast damage properly, what damage types are able to scale Eldritch Blast, stuff like that. So if you're not interested in that kind of stuff, feel free to just skip ahead to the passive sections where we, actually go through the skill tree and what to take and whatnot. If you're not interested in the why and the sort of nitty gritty, then yeah, just feel free to skip ahead. So obviously we're focused on the green tree. You need to take Incarnate in order to use Eldritch Blast. The Eldritch Blast, whenever you press X, you fire your little Eldritch Blast from your offhand, which deals damage to nearby enemies on impact. And then dealing gun damage will reduce the cooldown of Eldritch Blast. So the more instances of gun damage you can do quickly, the quicker you will get your Eldritch Blast back. So for that reason, we like high rate of fire weapons with this build. I usually go with the Wombo Combo or something similar. Something high rate of fire with a big mag size is nice. And then one thing, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you can actually just press and hold X to end Incarnate early. Like say you are in between encounters or you finish early, or you're boss farming or something, you can just hold X and you'll get a small amount of cooldown back. It's not a whole lot usually. It's just something that's good to know. So for augments, there are really only two that actually affect Eldritch Blast. So the first one we'll touch on is Witchy Trigger Finger, which is definitely the most popular one I think right now. So basically this will full reload your gun from empty and also give you a 15% gun damage stack that stacks up to 3 times and has a 15-second duration, which is a pretty decent duration. So this is excellent for bossing and honestly just for overall use. It allows you to have infinite heavy ordnance ammo. It allows you to stack torque stickies indefinitely it basically allows you to stack a bunch of stuff without needing to manually reload, and it basically just gives you free ammo and free gun damage. So this is sort of the go-to for most Vex builds right now because it doesn't really do much damage in itself, but the utility is excellent for gun builds, which is definitely where most of Vex's strength lies, is in her gun builds. So that's just sort of how Witchy Trigger Finger works, why it's so popular. But the second augment option that we have, and spoiler alert, this is the augment we're actually taking, is Iron Maiden. Now the reason we take Iron Maiden is because this results in a significant damage increase to our Eldritch Blast. With the right setup, it basically doubles our damage or more. And seeing as we're aiming to use this as our main mobbing tool, this damage increase is very important for us. So Iron Maiden reads, Phase Explosion, Eldritch Blast will restore shield for each enemy hit and deal increased damage based on Vex's current shield. So as you can see here, it increases our damage by 15% of our current shield capacity. So the way this works, this actually takes 15% of our current total shield and adds that to our base Eldritch Blast damage. So essentially that means that Iron Maiden acts as a multiplier for the build. This is one of the only multipliers we're actually really able to take advantage of for Eldritch Blast. And what I mean by multiplier is that if you're not familiar with how the damage works in this game, most damage sources are additive. For example, things like our gun damage, our splash damage, our skill damage, they're all sort of added into the same bucket, and then they're multiplied against your base damage, which for, Eldritch Blast, as you see here, is 8477, and then that's further multiplied by things like amp shots, which is why amp shields and amp rep kits are so strong. However, amp does not apply to Eldritch Blast because it does not count as a gunshot, and also Eldritch Blast is not really able to take advantage of many bonus damage options, which is another multiplier, things like bonus kinetic damage with guns, for example. We take this, I'll explain why later, but this doesn't actually apply to Eldritch Blast. So essentially, Iron Maiden is our one and only main multiplier for the build, so it's incredibly important that we take this if we want to do any source of respectable damage with Eldritch Blast. So as you can see here, we have almost 43,000 shield capacity with this turtle incapacity purple shield I found. I've seen ones that go even higher than this, and you are able to get even higher shield capacity in the skill tree, which we'll talk about, but I choose to sacrifice some shield capacity for some quality of life, but we'll talk about that later. But essentially, this 43,000 shield we have, 15% of that is taken and added onto your base Eldritch Blast damage. So 15% of 42,000 is about 6,500. Add that onto the 8477 Eldritch Blast damage, and that is almost a 75% multiplier to our total damage, because then all the other additive damage sources that we talked about, those will all get multiplied against our base Eldritch Blast plus that 15% of shield capacity. That essentially serves as its own multiplier. So incredibly important. So that's why Iron Maiden is so important. And you'll see, we'll talk about later, even if you don't focus on a high capacity shield, just having Iron Maiden focus. For example, I prefer to run Fireworks with this build, and luckily I do have a capacity one, so my shield's a little higher. But even with, I think I work out to about 23,000 or so shields with this build, that increase in damage that Iron Maiden gives us is still by far our biggest multiplier. So that's unquestionably the augment that we go with. Now we'll move on to our capstones. So all three capstones actually apply to Eldritch Blast. The first one is Desecration. Phase explosion to Eldritch Blast to create hazards, which deal damage over time for a duration. And Eldritch Blast is also now homing. And if it hits an enemy in the air, it will do an extra burst, basically to make up for the fact that if they're in the air, they're not going to be inside that hazard, which is basically like a splat on the ground that you see from some other skills. So they basically make up for it by doing just a burst of damage to that target if it's airborne. So this is a decent capstone, clearly a single target focus. The dot is okay. It's nothing spectacular. It can't really be scaled up to anything crazy, but it's not a bad option. The homing's nice. It just it just kind of is what it is. They did recently buff the hazard damage and the airborne burst damage, so it can do some good chunk of damage to some targets. I don't think it really compares to the next capstone we're going to talk about, which is Vibe Check. So Vibe Check basically turns Eldritch Blast into a charge skill. In other words, you have 3 charges rather than just the one. So when you throw Eldritch Blast, it'll ricochet based on the number of charges you have. So if you have 2 charges, it will ricochet twice. So the other important thing here is that Eldritch Blast's cooldown reduction from gun damage is doubled. So if you remember, when we shoot an enemy in our Incarnate, every time we deal gun damage, it cools down Eldritch Blast a little quicker. With Vibe Check, it actually doubles how fast that cooldown comes back. So when you're using Vibe Check, you can really spam Eldritch Blasts as long as you're just dealing like some decent gun damage. This is the capstone that we take in this build. So the reason is, like I said, we're using this primarily as a mobbing tool. Now, Desecration can do a little more damage to single targets. It's the same damage at base, but Desecration spawns that little splat that does deal hazard damage over time, which technically adds up to more damage. However, Vibe Check, in my eyes, does 3 times the amount of damage, because if you're doing a mobbing encounter, there's likely multiple adds around, and this will hit all 3 of them for the same amount of damage. So in my eyes, that's sort of triple damage during that mobbing encounter. So to me, it's Vibe Check without a question. It makes Eldritch Blast just so much smoother to use as a mobbing tool, and additionally, the much reduced gun damage makes it so we can basically just spam Eldritch Blast as fast as we can press our X button or whatever button you have it bound to. As long as you're dealing like good gun damage with a decent rate of fire, you can just pretty much perma spam Eldritch Blast if you're trying to focus down and chunk your target, because you can shoot and use Eldritch Blast at the same time, since Eldritch Blast sits on your offhand. So our third capstone is Heart Piercer, which Eldritch Blast now sacrifices health on use, but it becomes a big piercing wave. Enemies hit take damage, allies hit restore health. So this does actually get bonus damage based on how much health is sacrificed, which, as you see here, 20% of your current health is sacrificed, and then you get 150% of that sacrifice as bonus damage. So basically you can look at this as giving you 30% of your total HP as Eldritch Blast bonus damage, because 20% times 1.5 or 150% of your health is 30%. Now at first sight, this looks like this would be the best way to scale your Eldritch Blast damage in addition to Iron Maiden, but this skill actually reduces the base damage of Eldritch Blast down to 5836, as you can see here on the tooltip. So if you look back up here, the base damage of Eldritch Blast without Heart Piercer is 8477. The base damage of it with Heart Piercer is 5836, which is a 45% decrease, which is massive, and it's tough to overcome. So basically the bonus damage that you're getting based on your health, even if you include like some additional max health capacity in the skill tree or via firmware, it's basically getting you right back to where Eldritch Blast at base damage is anyway. So it kind of defeats the purpose. Now you can use Timekeeper's New Shield, for example, and gives you a big chunk of health, which will make Heart Piercer do more damage than Eldritch Blast at base. But then you cannot scale Iron Maiden, which is a way bigger multiplier than Heart Piercer could ever be. So for like I mentioned earlier, if you have like close to 60k shield like I have, Iron Maiden is basically doubling your Eldritch Blast damage, which a Heart Piercer can never just can't ever come close to, unfortunately, because you can't scale your health up to 30, 40, 50k. If there's a way to do that in the future, then maybe Heart Piercer will be viable. It does have great like kind of AoE, and you can spam it off cooldown. But with this build and the class mod that we're using, along with vibe checks, increased gun damage cooldown, we can perma-spam Eldritch Blast anyway, so Heart Piercer loses its value there as well. So this one did also get a buff. So this base damage used to be even lower. It's still just not quite where it needs to be. It feels like they want to use this as like the big mega blast. As you can see, it's clearly like a much bigger blast than like your normal Eldritch Blast. The like physical AoE is actually pretty big, but it doesn't have the damage to make it worth taking over the triple ricochet of vibe check or the dot damage of desecration, for example. So I would love to see Heart Piercer be like the Giga Nuke option if they just made the base damage the same, and then you could just focus on scaling shields and health. I think that would be an interesting style. I don't know what you guys think, but yeah. So you can use Heart Piercer if you want. It looks cool, but vibe check is going to be the way we're going to go on this build. Like I said, the triple ricochet just means basically 3x damage for mobbing scenarios. The ricochets are super consistent and reliable. So to me, it's vibe check, no question. I've played with all three of these like pretty extensively over the last few days, and it's just desecration's cool but I just always come back to vibe check. Before we get into the passives in the skill tree, I just want to quickly mention how we actually scale Eldritch Blast. I've spent way more time testing this, honestly, than I probably should have, so I figured I'd at least share what I learned. So as I mentioned previously, shield capacity is the most important source of scaling via Iron Maiden. If you decide not to build around high shield capacity, for example, if you want to run Fireworks like I like to, even just having Iron Maiden on and multiplying 15% of whatever shield you have is still a big multiplier and definitely worth taking. But aside from that, most of the damage that increases Eldritch Blast from here on out will be additive, but there are a lot of damage sources that will apply to Eldritch Blast. All the main sources that you would expect to apply, like action skill damage, splash damage, skill damage, etc., elemental damage. But in addition to that, with our Technomancer class mod, all ordnance damage will also apply. So this applies all ordnance damage at 100% full value to Eldritch Blast. Additionally, this makes Eldritch Blast count as ordnance damage. So if you're trying to proc like ordnance kill skills or whatever, like Icy Attunement, they will proc off Eldritch Blast, which is nice. So in addition to that, thanks to our Eldritch Blast now counting as ordnance damage at base, we are also able to get to 100% gun damage through our specializations. So we take Full Spectrum Arsenal, which essentially our ordnance damage now takes 50% of all gun damage increases. And then we also take I Am a Gun, which means action skill damage now benefits from 50% increases to gun damage. So since Eldritch Blast counts as both ordnance for 50% and action skill for another 50%, we were able to get 100% full value out of all gun damage increases. So this is the number one damage increase that we're looking for in our skill tree and in our gear, because this will directly scale our Eldritch Blast, and it'll also scale, interestingly enough, our Fireworks rockets and our Fire Pot. I don't know if this is a known thing, but Fireworks does scale off of gun damage, and it also takes on bonus gun damage procs, such as the bonus kinetic gun damage from enchantment in the red tree, which is why we are taking this here, because this will proc on our Fireworks and our Fire Pot and our guns. Unfortunately, it does not work on Eldritch Blast, but our gun damage basically scales every single aspect of the build, including our guns themselves, of course, our Fire Pot, our Fireworks, and our Eldritch Blast. So if we see gun damage, we can take it, and we're able to get quite a bit from Grave Implements. We can get up to 120%, which is a huge increase, and then we also get another 50% from Specializations. So that's like our number one focus stat-wise. But as you can see, pretty much all our damage increases that we can even get in the skill tree will apply. So our splash damage applies to Eldritch Blast, our gun damage applies, once again, our gun damage, our skill damage, our action skill damage, our ordnance damage. If you were to take Claw and Bang, that would also count. There's a lot of different nodes we can take to increase our damage. All right, so I'm just gonna take you through the skill tree real quick. So obviously we're mostly green tree focused. We do have some points in red tree, which we'll touch on. First row, Volatile Essence. Vex gains increased splash damage, double the effect and action skill, which is 100% of the time. So this is really 40% splash damage for our Eldritch Blast, our Fireworks, our Fire Pot, and for our Wombo Combo rockets or any other splash damage we deal. So this is great. And then second row, we take Grave Implements, 5 out of 5. Vex and our minions gain increased gun damage for a duration, 20% per stack, which goes up to 6 stacks when we take Grave Power. So that's basically a free 120 gun damage if we can kill stuff fast enough, and when we're landing crits on bosses, which is thanks to Mortal Terror, which activates kill skills when critting. And then, so like I said, third row, we're taking Grave Power 3 out of 3 for more max stacks, and then the next 2 points just need to go somewhere in this top part. I just go for more crit and gun damage. You can go over some gun crit damage, and go for longer action skill duration if you want, but we take Grave Sustenance, so we don't really need it. But really, these 2 points are up to you. Moving down, we start on the left here. We're going to talk about this tree a little bit. So 5 out of 5. Conjunction is great. Once again, 30% gun damage, which scales our Fireworks, our Fire Pot, and our Eldritch Blast, and our guns. So gun damage is great. This is free, basically, because we're going to be full shields almost always because of the Iron Maiden restoring our shields every time we hit something with an Eldritch Blast. This is a huge chunk of restoration, so you can basically assume it's 30% at all times. One thing I wanted to mention, if you are looking to get like the highest possible damage number from Eldritch Blast for some reason, take Radiant Attunement and use a radiation weapon against shields. I think radiation's best against, because Radiant Attunement increases your splash damage by 35% and maximum shield capacity by 40%, which is huge. So the like 42,000 shield we have now would go up to about 56k, which just further scales our Eldritch Blast damage. So this is like a double scaler for our Eldritch Blast. So Radiant Attunement's great. I was running this for a while, but I'm just not a fan of like swapping guns to get the attunement and then swapping to like a different gun to match the enemy type. Like for example, I do a lot of drill sites, so most of those enemies are flesh enemies, so it's better for me to have an incendiary gun out so that my Eldritch Blast does incendiary damage. They take like 75% more incendiary damage, which is more than anything on this tree could offer. So I like use an incendiary gun at all times, and then I would like be swapping back to my radiation weapon just to proc the attunement, and then swapping back to solar, I didn't like doing that. So this is sort of a quality of life pick for me while I'm passing on Radiant Attunement. This is the way to go if you want to max out your Eldritch Blast damage. But as you'll see, like in the gameplay, we don't need this to one-shot the ads as long as we're matching like our gun type. So that's why we pass on that, and we put the points that I would have put here, I do put in red tree. I would take the points out of Blood is Magic and put them into Radiant Attunement. Then moving over to the middle column, we take Keen Mind. This gives our Eldritch Blast 15% crit chance, which is nice because it doesn't have any crit chance otherwise. This is just a lot of free damage if we are lucky to get a crit, but basically we take this because we need to get down to Mortal Terror, and this gives us a chance to activate kill skills when critting enemies. So the kill skills we're activating on bosses, for example, is Grave Implements as well as Grave Sustenance. So we're activating that on bosses, and on any other like chunkier enemies that we're just headshotting, we're just spraying with our AR, so we're getting a lot of headshots. Additionally, something about this class mod, this is sort of like a tertiary benefit, but the class mod, which we'll talk about, you mostly get your Eldritch Blast back in this gameplay loop from getting kills. You'll just get your blast right back, or by throwing a grenade will also get your blast back, and by shooting your gun, which is just how Eldritch Blast works at base. But the fourth thing it does here is any kill skill you trigger will also give you Eldritch Blast back. So it's just like one more small chance to get it back. But not really why we take it here, but I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was kind of a cool thing that they put in there. And then move to the right, we take Ars Arcana, 5 out of 5. They buffed this so it's 9% per point. So this is big value here. We also have 4 points on our class mod. I would love to find a +5 one, but I haven't had that luck. That would bring me to 90% skill damage here. So that is great. So yeah, Ars Arcana for sure. And then we go over to our red tree. Like I said, 4 to 5 Grave Sustenance. This is good enough to keep our action skill up easily when we're mobbing or when we're killing bosses and proccing Mortal Terror. I could probably even go 3 out of 5, but I'm not really losing anything by not putting that point somewhere else, to be honest. 5 out of 5 bonus kinetic damage with guns while her action skill is active. So this does not proc an Eldritch Blast, but this does work on Fireworks and Firepot. So this is buffing our Fireworks and Firepot by a pretty significant amount. So I thought these points were nice to take here because there's not really anything else like that's really increasing our Eldritch Blast damage at this point that we haven't already taken. Like you could take gun damage in Blue Tree here, this Cold Iron, but it's only 15%. We already have so much additive between skill damage, Grave Implement stacks, like a lot of the other stuff. To me, like getting big bonus damage out of our Fireworks and Firepot, which are doing a decent chunk of work in this build, was worth it to me. So I take those. It works on your guns too, obviously. So to me, those are good points to put there. And then Blood is Magic, 5 out of 5, 40% of full health, which is pretty much always because our shields never break. So that's the skill tree. We'll talk about specializations real quick. So I talked about this earlier in the video, but we take full spectrum arsenal so that our ordnance damage takes 50% of gun. Our Eldritch Blast counts as gun thanks to our class mod. So this is a free half of our gun damage gets applied. And then another 50% of our gun damage gets applied because obviously Eldritch Blast is an action skill. So now between these two, 50 plus 50, 100% of gun damage is being applied, which is nice. We take now with caffeine because if our action skill happens to go on cooldown, we can just pop triple bypass, 3 quick rep kit hits, and we're back in action pretty much immediately. And then review this, free 50% gun damage. Like I said, gun damage is big value in this build. So we just take it. Now to go over the gear real quick, the sort of main requirement for this build is the Technomancer class mod. So this does a few things for us. As we mentioned multiple times, it makes your Eldritch Blast deal ordnance damage. So now we can take all the ordnance damage increases and anything that ordnance damage would proc will proc off that. But more importantly, whenever we get a kill, trigger a kill skill, or use a grenade, we'll get Eldritch Blast back. So that's why you see in the footage, I don't even need to shoot my gun to get Eldritch Blast back. Every time I kill something, I get it back. So I can just spam it indefinitely without having to like think or shoot or wait for any cooldowns. Like there's almost always a way for me to get it back. Basically, throw Eldritch Blast. If you get a kill, you throw it again. If you get a kill, you just keep throwing it. If you don't get a kill, then you throw your grenade, and then you throw another Eldritch Blast. If you don't get a kill again, then you throw a second grenade, and then you get another thing. So you just have like so many ways to just constantly have your Eldritch Blast up, which is just huge, and it just makes the build feel really satisfying to play. And then obviously, if you're out of all grenades and charges, you can just shoot whatever big enemy is for some reason still alive, and that'll get your Eldritch Blast back. And then you'll die, and then you'll just move on to the other enemies. And keep in mind too, with Vibe Check, if you're shooting a big enemy and you're throwing your Eldritch Blast at it, the ricochets are going to be getting kills in the background. So even if you're not killing the big target you're shooting at, the ricochet kills are going to be getting kills for you and refunding your Eldritch Blast like really quickly. So it's really nice here. This is a pretty good roll I'm happy with. Got elemental damage on it. I would love +5. Ars Arcana, but beggars can't be choosers. So the shield, and this is something you can really play around with, like based on how much damage you feel like you need. So I know a lot of people probably don't have a high capacity shield, but this is technically the way to get the most damage out of the build because this will scale up your Iron Maiden, which scales up your Eldritch Blast damage. It's basically like a multiplier I talked about earlier in the video. However, just by taking Iron Maiden, that multiplier on its own, like even if you just have a normal amount of shield, is still enough to one-shot most mobs if you're matching the element to their health. So for example, if I'm using an incendiary gun against flesh, then that with Iron Maiden and just like a normal shield is enough to one-shot pretty much all mobs, as you'll see in the footage. So I like to run a kinetic Fireworks with capacity here, which gives me shield capacity, which increases Iron Maiden by a little tiny bit. But this is what I run most of the time, even though I'm not going for a huge shield capacity. I'm still one-shotting most mobs, and the Fireworks are doing a lot of heavy lifting as well. To me, the Fireworks and the Eldritch Blast, like vibe check ricochets, are just sort of a bread and butter combo. Really fun combo. Enhancement does not really matter. Just match it to your gun. I have a nice little Vladoff one. I use them like all the time with my wombo combo. Wish it had multiplicative gun damage here, but it doesn't. One thing to note, the gun damage on enhancement actually does not get applied to Eldritch Blast, so that's why our enhancement doesn't really matter. But this lets us just shoot our wombo combo for longer, and an extra projectile means more chance for kill skill procs from Mortal Terror, so solid mod there. Triple bypass, I think super important, because if you for some reason get caught without your action skill up, if say you die somehow, it's really hard to die in this build, but if you die or you're just like in an awkward point where you don't have your action skill up or something, triple bypass, you just boom 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 and you get it back immediately with now with caffeine in your specialization. So but if you want to try something else here, go for it. And then fire pot, like I've mentioned, if you guys aren't aware, fire pot does actually scale off of gun damage, because I think the toric stickies here are coded to be gun damage basically, so they get your bonus kinetic, they get all your gun damage increases. They actually get 150% of your gun damage increases, because they get 100% of the gun damage because it counts as a gun for some reason, but also it gets 50% from the specialization full spectrum arsenal, so you're getting like 150% efficacy out of your gun damage. Is that the right word? I don't know. But anyway, so I think Firepot's great here. If you want to run something else, if you want to, you can run like any grenade with like a lot of charges is great too, because that means you can just keep refunding your Eldritch Blast every time we throw a nade. I would love to find a Firepot with +3 charges, but just haven't been able to. So, and then for guns, I like, clearly as you can see here, I enjoy the wombo combo. It works well with this build. Just like a lot of high rate of fire, a lot of bullets being spammed out. The rockets take the splash damage, so you're just it just feels really good with this build. If you want to go with something that deals more damage for making up some like bossing or like some drill site bossing damage, go for it. I just like to have one incendiary for flesh, one radiation for shields, and then one corrosive for armor. And that's sort of it for the guns. Pretty flexible. I would just make sure you have some elements so you can change up your Eldritch Blast affinity as needed. So first I wanted to just show off what this looks like with the Fireworks shield. So we're not running max shield capacity for max Eldritch Blast damage, but clearly, as you'll see, like most red bar ads are getting one shot by our Eldritch Blast anyway, so we don't need that additional damage. But I'm going to do a run with this and then with max shield capacity, just so you can kind of like see the difference in the damage that I'm doing. But I just think Fireworks are better because you're sort of able to get more of that vibe check. The vibe check ricochets, when those get kills, the Fireworks will funnel back into like basically whatever you're shooting at or other ads around the arena, so it's a way to sort of like multiply their damage further. It's kind of up to you. I just think, I mean, we're doing a mob focused build, so I just think Fireworks makes more sense, and it just synergizes so well with the vibe check ricochets. Okay, so we are at the Saw's Clench Ripper drill site, which is where the wombo combo drops from, so I figured it'd be a good one to show off. Would love to get a shiny because wombo combo's the goat. I actually have 3 wombo combos on, so I mostly use incendiary for this because it's mostly flesh enemies, but you know, you can swap to radiation for shields and then corrosive for armor. Keep in mind that Vex's trait, her main trait, her abilities are attuned to the element of her gun. So when I'm an Eldritch Blast, or when I'm an Incarnate, whatever element gun I'm holding, the Incarnate changes to that element. So I can just Eldritch Blast any element I need, but I just will stay on Solar for most of this because these guys are flesh, and Incendiary is really good against flesh. I think I said Solar, I got Destiny on the brain, unfortunately. As you can see, I don't even need to shoot my gun. Everything just pretty much dies in one shot easily. One thing I want to show, I'll show off on the boss, but thanks to our class mod, that's why I'm getting an Eldritch Blast back every, oh there it goes. So basically every time I get a kill, I get Eldritch Blast back. If I don't secure a kill, I can also throw a grenade, and that will give me Eldritch Blast back. And if that fails, I throw another grenade, throw another Eldritch Blast, and if that fails, I can just do gun damage. So on the boss, we'll use all 3 of those tools to just have constant Eldritch Blast spam. We'll shoot, throw Eldritch Blast, stop cooldown, shoot, throw Eldritch Blast, and then when I reload, you'll see usually I'll throw a grenade during boss damage. I love the Fireworks combo. As you can see, the vibe check ricochets, I will just be hitting everything like around the arena off screen, and then there's just Fireworks chaining back into whatever I'm shooting at. So it's sort of a way to like double that vibe check damage. And also on the boss, you'll see like I can just focus one boss, and the vibe check ricochets will be hitting all the other bosses and adds and funneling like firework damage into the boss. And it's just like a really nice sort of cycle. Go back to solar. Incendiary, sorry. And then while I'm reloading, I like to throw a grenade to just keep my Eldritch Blast going. So, like I said, it's not like the most incredible bossing tool. It's clearly a mobbing tool too, but it can do some work. Like, obviously you can kill those bosses quicker than that with builds, but I wouldn't necessarily call it slow. It's definitely incredibly fun, which I think matters more than anything, as long as you're not like hampering yourself. Okay, so now we're gonna do like a max shield capacity version. So we took off Fireworks. So you'll see, you know, we're doing even more damage than we were. I missed that one, but we're doing like 117,000. This is before I have like anything really stacked up. 123. So we were one-shotting them before. We're over even more one-shotting them now. But we just don't have the Fireworks, but we do have the vibe check ricochet, so everything's just kind of dying anyway without us even looking at it. Could have switched to radiation for this guy's shield, but I didn't really feel like it. So as you can see, everything is just kind of dying. Everything except those like multiple health bar enemies are just dying one shot. The meatheads, 2 shots. Sometimes, like rarely, the ricochet will actually come back to the enemy that you first threw it at. It doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened to me before. Bosses are up now. Throw a grenade while we're reloading. Minimize our downtime. So you can see we're doing a little better boss damage. Maybe slightly better. But it's kind of the same. So that's sort of the reason I take Fireworks. Like, I'm not doing anything significantly quicker with this that I wouldn't be doing with the Fireworks shield on. So that's why it's like I said, I just wanted to like inform people how to get the max damage out of Eldritch Blast, but it's not necessarily needed as long as you take Iron Maiden. Even though, like, obviously the way to max out Iron Maiden is to get as much shield capacity as possible, you're still, just by equipping Iron Maiden, you're doing a lot of damage. Okay, so for our boss kill, we're at Leader Willem in the Grindstone of the Worthy in Carcadia Burn. This is where you get the Fire Pot Grenade, which is, I think, a pretty important part of the build. I mean, you can really run whatever grenade you want, but Fire Pot scaling with gun damage makes it like the best grenade ordnance in the game, in my opinion. So this guy has shield health first, so we'll start on radiation. Okay, I got the zoomies. I never popped my action skill, so we should probably do that. And then we just shoot at him and spam away. Vibe checks are going off, killing everything in the arena. Fireworks are coming back in. Well, they're not. Yep, there they go, hit the boss. We're gonna swap to Cryo for his armor. And even though I have no health, I'm not worried because I know my vibe checks and refill my shield pretty quickly. And he's dead. So like I said, it's not like an instant one-shot boss kill, but it gets the job done. Oh, there's a fire pot for us. Lifesteal. We were looking for a +1. Oh, we dropped 2? I can't see the other item. Tell me that's in the ground. Nice, dude. Well, hopefully that shows up in my lost loot or whatever. Okay, so like we did with the drill sites, real quick, we're just gonna do a max shield capacity version. So we don't have Fireworks, but we do have more just raw damage from our Eldritch Blast. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's gonna probably be about the same, but the ad clear part will be worse. Slightly worse, but not much worse. Yeah, you'll see everything off screen still dying anyway. So this probably died a little faster. He didn't really move much that time. Yeah, so it's kind of a wash. So that's why, in my opinion, it's like might as well just use Fireworks over just like a nothing. I mean, there's like, if you want to experiment with some other shields, Watts for Dinner does add bonus damage to Eldritch Blast, but it's like a very small amount. It's like 10% or less, I found, which is damage. But if you're just gonna do that, like, I'd rather just run Purple Shield, because the only way you can really get Overshield with this build, actually, might as well mention that, is in Red Tree. So the Technomancer class mod can roll with what is this perk called? Blast Rights. Whenever you use Ordnance, you get a small Overshield. So like every time I throw my grenade, I would be getting some Overshield, and that would proc Watts for Dinner. So that's like an option. I know a lot of people have like God roll Watts for Dinners at this point. So that's gonna do it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, learned something new about Eldritch Blast, and that it is viable as a mobbing tool, and it's a ton of fun, like just doing open world content and stuff. Basically anything outside of like strictly boss farming might be my new favorite build to just like run around with, because you're just throwing Eldritch Blast at everybody. There's ricochets, fireworks coming out of like random places. So just a lot of fun. It was a joy to put together, and I hope you guys learned something and enjoyed it. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Peace.